very special edition of the India Development Debate right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya, Shrinate, and with me is my colleague and co-anchor Sandeep Gurumurthi. It is finally official. The board of ICICI Bank has asked its managing director and chief executive Chanda Kochhar to go on leave until Justice Srikrishna submits his report on the alleged clash of interest charges against her. After a marathon board meeting which got over just a few minutes ago, the bank has also appointed Sandeep Bakhshi, who is heading ICICI's life insurance business, as the bank's chief operating officer and a whole-time director of the bank. He will, of course, be reporting to the board. ICICI Director NS Kannan has been named the new operational head of ICICI Pru Life.
Chanda Kochhar has been on the firing line ever since whistleblower Arvind Gupta raised fresh charges of clash of interest. The Enforcement Directorate and the CBI are independently probing the charges against Chanda's husband Deepak Kochhar, while the Securities Exchange Commission of the US is also looking into the allegations. But what made the going tough for Chanda is the show-cause notice issued by market regulator SEBI earlier this month. But today's decision of the ICICI Bank's board has raised more questions than answers. First and most importantly, it keeps the door open for Chanda to come back as a CEO if she is absolved of all charges. Also, the appointment of Bakshi as a COO is unlikely to be taken easily by the executive directors, including the independent directors of the bank. Is this a face saver of sorts? Has this action come in too late? And is it too little? Is what we're going to debate on this special edition of the India Development Debate, raising some tough questions on the show this evening. Before we introduce our panel and take it to our experts, let me bring on board my colleagues Ashwin Mohan and Abhinava Das, corporate director of ET Now, to understand what's really transpired. Ashwin, of course, has been tracking the board meeting all day. Ashwin, it appeared as if, Sandeep Bakhshi would be appointed as the interim CEO. However, he's only been appointed as a COO and given a 5-year term. How are we to read this announcement that's been made by the board of ICICI Bank?
Sandeep, this clearly seems like a very carefully thought out, hedged decision by the ICICI board, keeping in mind all sorts of possible scenarios that can come out of the closet in the future. If you look at the manner in which the markets reacted earlier today to the possibility of Sandeep Bakhshi being named as an interim CEO, the stock ran up by 4%. Therefore, at the end of this board meeting, one can safely assume that what has happened is almost an anticlimax of sorts, because Sandeep Bakhshi has been elevated, but he's not been named the interim CEO. However, one of the biggest demands of several corporate governance experts who we've been speaking to during the course of the entire ICICI Videocon case is the fact that Chanda Kochhar should step down while the investigations against her go on. That has definitely happened. So at least one half of the corporate governance community will be pleased that she has stepped down and she will go on leave. But the fact of the matter at the end of the day is that Chanda Kochhar will continue to be the MD and CEO. Look at the two scenarios. Sandeep Bakhshi has been appointed as whole-time director and chief operating officer designate. All the EDs on the board will report to him. He will continue to report to Chanda Kochhar. But on the other hand, the exchange also says that when she's on leave, he will report to the board. So, it's a very peculiar situation of sorts. Some might say that Sandeep Bakhshi is not the right man for the job. He's an outsider. But one also has to consider the fact that he's an ICICI veteran. 30 years, he's been associated with various portfolios, including ICICI Securities. He's been associated with the insurance arm. Mind you, he's also looked at the retail operations in the past, and he's also been a former deputy MD. So to say that he's entirely an outsider, well, that would be a little unjustified. But yes, at the end of the day, stakeholders, shareholders, and certain corporate governance experts would have wanted him to get that mantle of either an interim CEO. Maybe that might disappoint a few people. On the other hand, I guess Chanda Kochhar had no option but to step down, because at the end of the day, right, Justice Srikrishna cannot be conducting an independent inquiry with her still in the corner office. So that's where it stands as of now.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see how the stock reacts tomorrow to this very carefully hedged decision.
Right. Hold your thoughts there, Ashwin Mohan. I'll go across to Abhinava Das. And Abhi, is this also an indication how Chanda Kochhar may have had her way? She goes on leave. She's not quit her position. She goes on leave. She's on leave till the probe ends. The COO is supposed to report into her unless, of course, she's on leave. And the second question, and an obvious question, is what has triggered this change of heart at the board, the very board that gave her a clean sheet very, very eagerly, seems to have had a change in heart. What has amounted to this change in heart? An SEC possible probe?
Well, Supriya, coming to your second question first, I think the pressure was really mounting on the ICICI Bank board, and this is a decision which will please all, because if you look at the way it's been structured, I mean, Sandeep Bakhshi becomes the COO. It's just a redesignation because he continues to report to Chanda Kochhar, but the problem here is Chanda Kochhar is on leave. So in the whole process, what comes out it that the structure more or less remains the same, only apart from the fact that Sandeep Bakhshi has come on board as the Chief Operating Officer. But if you look at the whole decision per se, I mean, one would imagine that Chanda Kochhar was refusing to let go, because one clearly can see that if she steps down, it almost is like giving out the impression that there was something amiss, something wrong. And this is not a message that Chanda wanted to convey. And very clearly, and given the kind of clout that she enjoys within the board, especially from the executive directors, because these days we see a lot of super CEOs who have tremendous powers and which in a way undermines the authority of the board. So this could well be one such case. That's what most of the corporate governance experts are talking about, that definitely Chanda had her way and she will go on leave, but she continues to remain the managing director and CEO.
We'll leave it at that. Ashwin Mohan and Abhinava Das reporting on every twist and turn on what's been a sensational development in the ICICI Bank case. Finally, Chanda Kochhar deciding to go on leave and the board appointing an interim, appointing a COO. Let's take it across to our panel. We've got a stellar panel on this edition of the India Development Debate. It's a pleasure to welcome on board Nirmalya Kumar, former member, Group Executive Council, Tata Sons, and an expert really in strategy and management. He's been on board of several companies as well. He's also a distinguished fellow at the INSEAD Emerging Markets Institute. Prabal Basu Roy, management advisor and former corporate director. Jayan Gupta, founder MD and MD of SES and a former ED at SEBI, and Hemendra Hazari, banking expert who's not sort of shy of calling out this entire case. He's been very critical of the way the board has conducted this issue. We'll also be joined in a bit by Meera Sanyal, former CEO and Chairman, Royal Bank of Scotland. Let me take this to you first, Nirmalya Kumar. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the India Development Debate. How do you read this dramatic turn of events? The board deciding to ask her to go on leave, but if you read through the release, it almost seems like much of the day was spent in crafting this press release to ensure that everyone is happy, that that Chanda Kochhar is happy, the board appears to have redeemed itself, and stakeholders keep quiet. I mean, how do you read what has happened, what has transpired over the last 10 minutes or so?
So I can only base it on the press report that I just received, which said, very specifically it said, the one that I read, that Chanda Kochhar has decided to go on leave. It didn't say that the board had asked her to go on leave or asked her to step down, but that she has decided to go on leave. And that language suggests to me very clearly that she is still in the driving seat. This is a subservient board. It's an inept chairman at best, who really has no control over the board. Is the CEO that controls the board. So any corporate governance expert or anybody who's been on many boards can read that press statement, and if it taken on prima facie value, it would say, and also looking at the events of the last 2 years, clearly this is not a new story. From March 2016, they've known of these problems, and they've only moved grudgingly whenever they've had no other choice. And even this move is half-hearted from my perspective at best, because it shows a very powerful CEO, a subservient board, a chairman who's really not the chairman of the board in the sense of what a chairman of the board is supposed to do, and a statement that has been crafted to say she has decided to leave, go on leave, and whenever it fancies her, she'll probably come back, because it's her decision to go on leave and it's her decision probably to come back.
That's perhaps hitting the nail on its head, that it really is Chanda Kochhar's decision to go on leave. The board hasn't asked her to go on leave, and that's the fine differentiation. And thank you very much for putting that in perspective right at the beginning of the show, Nirmalya. But I'm going to take this across to Mr. Prabal Basroy. And Mr. Roy, is this seemingly a compromise, and has Chanda Kochhar had the upper hand in this compromise? She continues to be MD and CEO. She goes on leave for her own choice. The Chief Operating Officer, the man who's appointed, actually reports into the CEO only till such time that she's or not on leave. Is this a compromise that has been reached, and has Chanda Kochhar had the upper hand in this?
It's a very tricky question. You know, it's extremely tricky. However, see, the way I look at it is like this. You know, in Urdu there's a saying, "Der aaye durust aaye." This is exactly that. What should have been the obvious course of action took the board 3 months and so much public outcry before they did something. Now, the problem here is, of course, that the board has still not given a clear message about how the inquiry needs to be conducted. That is the main concern as far as I am concerned. I had always called for Chanda to step aside, not to resign, step aside. So step aside part has probably happened in some form or shape. But the part which is not happening, I think, even now, is that the board is not giving a clear message in terms of showing its will and determination to get to the bottom of this. That is the key question to my mind. However, we have somebody as illustrious as Mr. Srikrishna heading the panel, so we hope things will sort of unravel as it goes along. But the board is not giving a clear message, and to that extent I agree with Nirmalya that you know, the will and determination to set the corporate culture, the tone of corporate culture within the ICICI fraternity is not coming out very clearly. And mark my words, you know, the parallel investigation is going on by the CBI and the ED, etc. While that will necessarily focus on the strict legality of the issues concerned, definition of relatives, this, that, and the other, the board instituted inquiry, to my mind, should look at the ethical governance part of it. You know, what constitutes ethical leadership and where it figures it in here. So that perhaps is more important.
Okay, I take that point. Joining us now on the phone line is VG Kannan of the IBA, he sort of a senior voice in the banking industry. Mr. Kannan, appreciate you joining us on the phone line. Your reaction to what's been announced by the ICICI Bank. The panel here believes, or at least the ones that we've spoken to so far, believes that it's not enough, that this doesn't really qualify as a board having acted in the highest standard of corporate governance. As a banking industry veteran, how are you reading the step taken by the board of ICICI Bank, Mr. Kannan?
For one, I think I would say once the allegations have started coming thick and fast, Chanda Kochhar could have stepped aside. And this time around, I think the board has actually indirectly told her to step away for some time. And to manage the affairs of the company, they have brought in Sandeep Bakhshi. And Sandeep Bakhshi, of course, as of now, to report to the MD and CEO, now that she is on leave, therefore he'll probably report to the board. The focus will be whether what's going to happen later when Justice Srikrishna will probably look into the entire governance issue as to what actually transpired and whether the ethics and proper governance has been followed in the board and in the dealings. And I'm sure to keep up his reputation, he will also come with a very fair, investigation into the entire thing and give a report. And let's see, take it forward. I think let's leave it to the board. And they have taken this call of getting in an outside person, because as a part of the ICICI family, to stand in place of a Kochhar in the interim. So let's wait for the Justice Srikrishna's report, and let's not take it further beyond this.
Okay. Okay, just hold your thoughts there, sir, because I want to join Hemendra Hazari and Jayan Gupta also into this discussion. But Mr. Hazari, to you first, the board seems to have taken some call. Both Nirmalaya and Prabal Roy Basu here believe that it has not still taken a bold call enough. It has still not set the next course of action as far as ICICI Bank is concerned. But having taken whatever little action that the board has, do you believe the board today can redeem itself? Because, you know, many people will question having Chanda Kochhar still as MD and CEO. Yes, she's going to be on leave. Is Sandeep Bakhshi just going to be a titular sort of a COO?
See, we don't know whether he'll be a titular CEO or not, but I think it's widely accepted now that the ICICI Bank board has totally discredited itself. It is far too little and extremely late. What they should have done when the first charges were levied, they have done after many months, and that too because of public pressure. So this board, as you know, as Mr. Kumar has very rightly pointed out, this chairman, Mr. Sharma, they are thoroughly discredited. So one wonders then how will this new CEO who comes in, who will really be pulling his strings? Will it be the board? Will it be Chanda Kochhar? You know, is she still very much in control? Because as has been pointed out, the way she has gone on leave, she has gone on leave on her terms. So the whole thing, it seems to have been done on her terms. The board, for all practical purposes, doesn't seem to exist in ICICI Bank.
Fair enough. Jane Gupta, just to play the devil's advocate, look, at the end of the day, to be fair, the board can claim and say that we wanted her to not in any manner influence the probe. We've appointed a person of very high repute to chair an independent probe like Justice Srikrishna. No one can question his competence and integrity. She is stepped aside as a CEO, and we believe, you know, that she has done nothing wrong, and let the probe determine that outcome. And if it does come out that she's done nothing wrong, then she can always come back as MD and CEO. Why are we prejudging you know, anything before a probe is over? There are independent investigative agencies that are also looking into the matter. Let the facts come out, let there be an independent probe, and then let's take a call. That could well be the argument presented by the board. Jane Gupta, does that cut ice? Mr. Gupta?
Hello.
Yeah, that's for you, Mr. Gupta. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. This question was to me.
Yes.
So, okay. So, I would say that there is something known as dignified decision in a professional world. Now, I was listening to everything. When we read between the lines, that it is not the board decision, but it is Chanda Kochhar's own decision to go on her terms. Now, we got to take two positions. One, Chanda Kochhar is guilty, Chanda Kochhar is not guilty. Now, when Chanda Kochhar is not guilty, I as a board say, okay, you should go on leave, and she says, okay, I will go on leave, but I will go on leave on my terms. I don't think there is anything wrong. But if she is guilty, then it is certainly wrong. So, I think we should not read anything in between, for the simple reason we do not know today what is wrong. But I agree with all the panelists that board has not covered itself with glory, because when in March itself they gave first clean sheet to Chanda Kochhar, it was a very hasty clean sheet, because they had not done any investigation, they just based on some certain thing gave thing. Now, I have been maintaining that it is not out of the public pressure they have appointed a Srikrishna commission. It is because of the very simple fact that SEBI has issued them a show cause notice, and in response to show cause notice they could not have said, okay, board find nothing wrong. So, they had to go deep into that, and in order to give credibility to the SEBI response to the SEBI, they were forced to appoint Srikrishna commission. Again, the issue is coming is that they have taken 3 weeks to appoint Srikrishna commission after an announcement that there will be independent inquiry. Yesterday or today morning we read the newspaper that Mr. Sharma's term is coming to end on 30th June. We do not know on 18th June whether he will continue as the chairman or there will be new chairman. Then other issue is coming, which I am saying, when you appoint a new person, Mr. Bakshi, somewhere in between the existing structure of MD and executive director, it is going to cause lot of heartburn between executive directors, in the case when Chanda Kochhar comes back as MD, because earlier they were reporting directly to MD, now they will have to report through a intermediary structure. But again, I feel when I read between the thing that it is very clear that board is not going to extend the board the Mrs. Kochhar's term beyond 2019, because otherwise they will create some sort of a disturbance in the existing structure.
Okay, I take that point, Mr.
Now,
Gupta.
coming to think whether
Mr. Gupta, allow me to interrupt you. Mr. Gupta, allow me to interrupt you. I want a reaction from Nirmalya Kumar to the point that you made and to the larger question that I was asking Nirmalya. I mean, you know, it's all right for us to sit here and be critical, which we have been on this channel and on various other platforms. But the fact of the matter is the board could, I mean, I'm playing the devil's advocate, the question that I asked Mr. Gupta, the board could well turn around and say, look, you know, we've appointed an independent probe. Okay, you could criticize them for the delay. We've now, you know, whether we ask her to step down or she steps down, the fact of the matter is she will in no manner influence the outcome of the probe. probe. She's going to keep an arm's length distance. She's going on long leave, and an interim COO has been appointed, or it's not interim actually, a COO has been appointed for management continuity. So the board could well cover, turn around and say, what more could we have done?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very interesting, because, this is, of course, the last gasp of the board. They can kind of go into this, try to shield themselves behind this curtain. But the thing is that this is not going to cut ice with anybody, to tell you the truth. Because, just because the first reaction that they had when this news broke in the press was to reaffirm support for the CEO, rather than at that stage to show some integrity and judgment by taking a step back, looking at it and saying, listen, we are appointing an independent commission right away to examine it. And you have to remember that the board is, you have to look at a series of events, not only a single event. One of the problems is that the loan to the Videocon, for which they said she was not the chairman of the committee. They didn't say she excused herself from the entire loan assessment process, which is what she should have done. Secondly, then there was a question of the brother of the husband, becoming having a company which was advising borrowers, which everybody kind of knows in this industry is because you're well connected and you're kind of getting a cut on that. So in that case, they said, well, the brother of a husband is not defined as a relative in SEBI. So, what do you do on a board? In a board, I assume you have competence. What I'm looking for, do you have judgment and integrity? This board has shown they have neither judgment nor integrity. So it doesn't matter what they say at this stage. They've had a year and a half, because since March 2016, the story has been known. So it's almost 2.5 years, they've known about this story. And what they've shown is, in the face of this story, they've been subservient to the CEO. They've shown neither integrity, nor have they shown any judgment. And these two are the things that define competence of a board. It's not whether you know the law.
That's true. I think the judgment call is what defines the competence of the board, and not so much your legal knowledge. But Pravin Rai, coming to you, like Mr. Jain Gupta was pointing out there, is it the SEBI that has coaxed the board into taking some sort of an action, or a probable probe from SEC that has triggered this action? And the larger question is, with Chanda Kochhar now excusing herself, at least from the day-to-day functioning of ICICI Bank till such time that this probe is on, does this put the lid on corporate governance issues at the bank, or is it perhaps just a starting point?
See, there are two parts to this question, and frankly, the way it has been done, frankly, does not put a lid on the corporate governance issues. I mean, the way, see, the board needs to actually set the tone for the culture, the tone for the governance, and that is where it has been missing all throughout. And I've written about this as well way back in March. So, as far as this particular is concerned, it's sort of following in the same footsteps, in that sense. It's following in the same footsteps. They are doing things by checking the box. We asked for a CEO to step aside. We have independently, we have appointed a commission, all that. But is the will there? And that is something which will determine the outcome of this entire thing. And frankly, completely as a dispassionate viewer, I don't see that will there, as yet. And very rightly, as Mr. Gupta said, we will never know what caused this change of heart in the board. We will never know. It could be because of SEBI. It could be because of the second set of allegations which came recently. It could be because there was a nudge from the Ministry of Finance. It could be for various reasons of that nature, so we will never really know what happened. But it does look as if it didn't come from inside the heart. That is what it looks like.
Okay, you're saying it doesn't look like
the heart is not inside it.
Okay, you're saying it didn't look like as if they have the intent to act. But Hemendra Hazari, again, look, we don't have anyone who's sort of speaking on behalf of the board or representing the board or Chanda Kochhar's point of view, and so all I'm doing is trying to ask provocative questions, so that we get the best answers out in some sense. The board could well turn around, again, I'm playing the devil's advocate, could well turn around and say this is an outcome that maintains stability, right? You've had a sort of superstar CEO, quote unquote, good or bad, we'll come to that later, who has the potential to come back if her name gets cleared. This doesn't exactly destabilize the company because the person who's come in as a COO is an ICICI veteran. Executive directors will have a reporting structure. The board takes more active calls on the day-to-day operations of the company. So in some sense, this could well be good for the company. Or do you believe, as the stock market suggested, given the rally today, because the market was under the assumption that she's going to step down and that Sandeep Bakhshi will be appointed as the COO, because two leading newspapers, including the Economic Times, reported this morning that Sandeep Bakhshi is going to be appointed the COO. So the market reacted to that piece of news and the stock rallied 4%. So probably the market was happy to have her step down. So, how are you reading this whole stability point, Hemendra Zari?
From a stability point, it shows that the wordings of the press release show that she appears to be in charge, just behind the scenes and just on leave. See, that is what I think the market will be extremely apprehensive about, just like all the panelists here are now apprehensive about who's actually running and managing the bank. Is it the board or is it Ms. Chanda Kochhar on leave? And that is where the credibility question will come. And therefore, there are going to be more and more concerns. Like, how is he going to be still taking orders from Chanda Kochhar as CEO, and it will be just indirectly done through the board? So, the way the entire structure has been done, it appears to me that she is very much in control, but not visible to the public eye.
Okay. That's an important point, that she's perhaps going to be running the show, not in the public eye, is an apprehension that you share. But the other apprehension is on the role of the chairman. And Mr. Gupta, if I may come to you, the chairman whose term ends at the end of this month, later this month actually, how could Mr. Sharma have given a clean chit to Chanda Kochhar despite a probe by multiple regulatory and investigative agencies? There was a CBI probe, there's an ED probe. I mean, how could the clean chit have come? And does this also not raise questions on how hasty that decision also was in retrospect?
See, I would say, I have already said that very simply,
Mr. Gupta?
that the board had acted in haste in March when they gave a very soft clean chit to Ms. Kochhar. I really do not know whether she is wrong or not, but they were very hasty. Now, having taken a stand there, they had no option but to continue with the stand which they continued till today. Because if they change their stance without any inquiry or outcome of inquiry, then they will be having a face loss. So, in order to keep their face, continuous face and show the boldness, they have to continue with their original decision that we do not find Mrs. Kochhar has done anything wrong. Now, continuing with that, when they were forced to have an inquiry, they have done an inquiry. Now, the again question is this, as you rightly said, that Mr. Sharma is the chairman till 30th June. What happens after, whether he continues or not, whether the new 2 board members which have been inducted has gone. Now, I have been maintaining one very simple issue here, that the first person who should have come in support of Mrs. Kochhar was Mr. Deepak Kochhar. If somebody's wife is being maligned, the person's duty is to do everything possible to clear her name. Unfortunately, Mr. Kochhar has not done this. I would be there and say that, look, there is my balance sheet, here is my transaction, everything is open and transparent, do whatever you want to do, but don't malign my wife. So, that is where the weak point is, and that weaves the entire story around. Now, somebody was saying that this probe will ultimately not go beyond bank's probe, because what happened to Videocon loan and what happened to everything. I think that is not the scope of Mr. Justice Srikrishna's inquiry committee. It is for CBI and ED to look into it. But again, I would maintain that we do not know who is right or wrong, and the professional courtesy says that rather than board saying that please go on leave, Chanda Kochhar has said that I have decided to step aside. Let us not read anything much beyond
okay,
that.
you're saying don't read too much into that. That's not the view of the rest of the panel, but Jayant Gupta believes don't read too much into it, and we should wait for the facts of the probe to come out. Nirmal, let's sort of, since we spoke about the role of the board and the chairman, I think it's important for us to tell our viewers that even in this board meeting, the government representative and the LIC representative chose to not attend. We've raised this issue in the past and we've been critical of the role played by independent directors, because at the end of the day, who does their accountability lie to? Is it to their nominees or is it to minority shareholders? The government says it should not take a position on this particular case because its agencies are investigating the matter, and so it has asked its representative to not attend the board meeting. Similarly, LIC, which is the single largest shareholder of ICICI Bank, LIC's chairman is not attending the board meeting, and the government is now conveniently passed the buck to RBI, saying it's for the RBI to act. Does this excuse cut any ice?
No, this is very interesting. You know, I mean, if you are a board member and you don't attend such an important board meeting, you shouldn't be on the board. It's as simple as that. Just because you're a government employee, a government nominee, you know, what I've found in my past, looking at boards over at India, especially, that the government nominees have not played a very good role. The independent directors, we often, you know, criticize them, and they get criticized, you know, justifiably, because they are basically often in the cahoots with the promoters. But, you know, the government nominees are also supposed to be, you know, guardians for not only their shareholding, but also as guardians of corporate governance in India for the country. And I have to say that, you know, the government nominees have not covered themselves with glory over the years. And my own thing has been that this thing of skipping meetings is a very convenient way for both independent directors and for government nominee directors. I saw this even in the Tata Group, that when there was a pitch bottle and a tough vote had to be made, basically you would find, you know, independent directors missing in action by saying, you know, we are sick that day or whatever, or not showing up for some reason. And I think this is really, you know, goes to the heart of corporate governance. If we can't trust our independent directors to do their job, which is to act as a brake on the management, act as a brake on the promoters, we don't need independent directors, because then these independent directors are just basically independent in name, but they're not independent in you know, terms of their attitude and in terms of their behavior. And so this is very depressing for me. And, you know, when I see this, I feel really sad for the level of corporate governance in India, that, you know, you have a huge set of government nominee directors who don't want to play the role because they feel it's too controversial. You have a set of independent directors who are in cahoots either with the CEO in a diversified company or with the promoter in a promoter-held company, in which case, where is the ordinary stockholder going to get the trust and the confidence that somebody is looking out for them?
Fair point indeed. And, you know, I'll come back to you on a very important point that we want to raise. And there is this grapevine that's doing the rounds as well, and I think it's important that we talk about that. But I do want to talk about corporate governance, and you're disappointed with the role that the government has played, because in this case the government almost seems to be suggesting, if I'm going to look the other way, the crisis and the controversy does not exist. If my nominee directors are not going to go there, then I can really breathe a sigh of relief. That's exactly the stance that New Delhi seems to be taking. It's beyond my mortal comprehension. But let's talk about RBI's stance. And Hemendra Zare, what explains RBI's inaction? We are questioning the government and its nominees. I think it's important that we question the regulator too. In light of all the facts that have now been placed in the public domain, does the regulator believe that Ms. Kochhar is fit and proper to continue as CEO? And shouldn't the regulator be more proactive on this issue? I mean, 2 press conferences have happened after the controversy erupted. The governor or his deputies refused to take a question on ICICI Bank. It's as if the controversy doesn't exist. We are living in denial in New Delhi. We also seem to be living in denial on Mint Street.
RBI's role in this entire sordid episode has been that of a mute spectator. It is like virtually it is a non-entity in this whole area. It appears that it is not the banking regulator and that ICICI is not a bank. Now, this is unheard of. Here, the regulator should have immediately stepped in when the board was clearly not doing its job. But this RBI has just remained silent. Now, thankfully, it has been SEBI which has stepped in, and it is probably because of SEBI that some action is being taken. And I'm very sorry to say that RBI's credibility is touching new lows. And it's unfortunate that it's happening under the governorship of Dr. Urjit Patel, because it is simply not doing its job. You know, even other places, the way Shika Sharma was allowed to continue, you know, they've allowed her a 6-month extension. Now, all these things, the regulator should immediately step in to restore confidence, because banks, you know, the huge trust that they have, the depositors are unsecured. You have to immediately step in because you are the protector of financial stability in the country.
Fair. Fair point. I take that point, and Hemendra, you have been very critical and consistently critical on the role played by the central bank. But I want to bring a new facet to this discussion, the point that Supriya was alluding to, and I want Nirmala Kumar to react to that first before I take it to the others. Nirmala, we don't know how true these rumors are, but the grapevine has it that a corporate rivalry is playing out at ICICI Bank. Someone is out to get her, and someone is trying to protect her. Could someone powerful and influential in the corporate world be backing her? And does that explain why the government and the regulators are not taking a clear position in this case? Is that likely that someone very powerful and influential in the corporate sector is backing her, which is what is stopping this action? Otherwise, it seems a little inexplicable.
So I'm going to take a pass on that question only in one way and not in another way. One is, there's always a million conspiracies in India that you hear about any problem. I'm going to stay away from those conspiracies because I don't really believe most of the time these conspiracies turn out to be just that. These are, words passed around. Instead, I'm going to take up issue with what, on the RBI's role. I think it's very unfortunate in our country that we often look to the RBI and to the government to solve our problems. We have a corporate governance structure, which is the board. We should have laws which you can appeal to through a court, through a system of courts, which is where we should actually have these problems resolved. Why should we always need to look to some individual RBI director, head, or some government official to solve our problems? I think this is really a big, throwback to the past. What we should expect and what we should demand is that the corporate governance process, backed by the laws, backed by the SEBI, is good enough to solve any problem without it having always to be thrown in the ball of the regulator or in the court of the government. So I think, we need to somehow get away from this. So I'm going to disagree respectfully with some of my panelists on this one, because otherwise we've been very unanimous. Yes, the board is inept, but when the board is inept, there should be other processes for the individual investors to get redress. That includes the courts of law, that includes the SEBI system. But I don't think we should always look towards the regulators. Even SEBI is kind of a regulator in some sense. So we should look towards the corporate governance process backed by SEBI, and going to the regulators and going to the government should be the last resort. And actually it's not a very good resort, because then the hand of the government is looming very large in the running of individual private corporations, which I actually am against.
Fair point indeed. But Mr. Jayan Gupta, while Nirmala Kumar would want to give a pass on this one, you've dealt with this time and again, and I think it's only fair that I bring up this question with you, and like the great point that Sandeep was referring to, is it possible that there is a powerful corporate out there, at least the grapevine seems to suggest, that's fighting over the role of Chanda Kochhar, a very, very powerful corporate that wants to retain Ms. Kochhar in a position, and an equally powerful one that's out to get her? And does that explain why the government and the regulator is looking the other way?
It will be very, very difficult for me, who is not aware of what is happening inside the board or inside the government, to comment on this. But I would say very simply that let us go one by one. RBI is not sleeping, it is in hibernation, because RBI doesn't do anything. RBI has not spoken on PNB thing. RBI has not spoken on ICICI thing, whereas it was the first thing, because RBI has a duty to at least convey to the message to the stakeholder, depositors and borrowers that yes, we are seized of the situation, we are looking into it, and we prima facie don't find anything wrong, because RBI has left it to uncertainty, and everybody has his own theory. Somebody says want to protect Chanda Kochhar, somebody want to say not protect Chanda. Second, the role of nominee directors. Now, by definition, nominee is going to represent the interest of the person who has nominated them. So, it is wrong for us to accept that nominee director will be working as an independent director in the interest of all stakeholders. We have been writing against this, that nominee director will represent only one section. Now, the government is very clear, and it is right also, that if CBI or ED inquiry is happening, if nominee director attends the board meeting and tomorrow something is found relating to that board meeting, so the nominee government will itself be in the question that what the hell you were doing. Similarly, LIC has a duty to protect its investment and policy holder. if I am a holder of 100 share, I don't care whether there is a bomb blast or something, I don't care because I am losing only 100 share worth. But if LIC is holding 10% or 12% equity in a company, and they are holding in other banks also, so any run on the bank is going to bring their lot many investment to the question. So LIC has to act with a wisdom. Unless until something concrete comes out, LIC will not open its mouth.
Okay.
The duty is with the regulator and government
to act.
And let me complete.
Sure.
As far the governance is concerned, the governance is nothing but it is the integrity of the people. Integrity, how they implement the system. By changing person A, person B, you may give a message, but unless the systems and procedures are such that they will take it forward, we will only be waiting for 6 months or 1 year to happen it again.
Okay, I take that point, and it's good to get a slightly contrarian view on the role played by LIC there, and I take your point. I need to slip into a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to look at the larger picture. This isn't a solitary case of corporate governance abuse. We've seen corporate governance lapses in iconic organizations like Tata and Infosys. What does that tell you about the quality of boards, quality of governance in corporate India? That's what we're going to debate on the other side of the short break. Do stay with us. We're back in a moment on the India Development Debate.
Good to be back with you once again on the India Development Debate right here on ET. Now, we've put the spotlight on the big controversy and the decision that many people believe is a half-hearted one at the ICICI Bank board, where Chanda Kochhar will go on leave till the probe ends, and of course Sandeep Bakhshi comes in as Chief Operating Officer. I will come to you, Mr. Prabal Basu Roy, and this question really has to do with the super CEOs, and this isn't a solitary case of corporate governance abuse. We've seen corporate governance lapses in iconic organizations like Tata and Infosys. What does that tell you about the quality of corporate governance in Indian industry?
Supriya, it's interesting that you asked me this question today, because I'm on the cover of a national magazine exactly dissecting the issues of corporate governance in India. And it's an in-depth piece which talks about various things, but it essentially tries to answer the question why, with such alarming regularity, we have a Satyam, we have a United Spirits under the earlier dispensation, we have a Fortis, we have a Ricoh, we have small companies, big companies. Why is this happening with such alarming regularity? And it's a complex topic, so I can't take too much of your time here. But effectively, the corporate governance lapses, as I have observed it, and after being on boards of various companies, etc., is essentially around three factors. One, which is the Infosys and Tata types, which is essentially to do with imposition of the will of a particular person, on the company, which is one type of thing. The second one is in terms of accounting frauds, or accounting frauds, basically to divert money from one part of the organization to another part of the promoter's organization. And third is outright fraud, like Satyam or Ricoh for that matter. So these are the three basic types, and in all these cases, we've had independent boards who have checked the boxes of each item of corporate governance which you're supposed to do under the various regulations which we have, and yet these have happened. And the reason for that, according to me, is of course the culture of the region to which we belong, and this is to do with Southeast Asia, Asia in general, and which of India is a part. The second is to do with the basic character, of our ability to confront issues when powerful interests effectively. And the third is the whole culture of ornamental directors, ornamental independent directors. I mean, it's a big farce, and apart from various few companies are there, of course, like HDFC, all that, there are there, but effectively these are the three things. Yeah.
Okay, fair point. I think that's a very fair point that you've made in the show, and it's only fair I get Nirmalya to react to that. Nirmalya, having sort of been associated with the Tata Group and having also had a great understanding of how boards work in other global, companies. And what is it? I mean, is it the founder's mentality, of undermining the authority of the board? And frankly, it's not just in founder-driven companies, like we've seen now in the case of ICICI Bank, where, a classic case of a super CEO in some sense undermining the authority of the board. Why is it sort of unique to India?
So I'm not sure it's unique to India, but let me just say why it happens more frequently in India. So firstly, the thing is that in these cases, so there are two different scenarios. One is where the promoter is the chairman and the CEO is a professional. In those cases, the promoter controls the board, right? And basically that's what you saw in the Tata group, the Tata Sons problem, the Infosys problem was basically the promoter saying, I don't really care about the board. What I say goes. Whether I'm on the board or not on the board is all irrelevant. The chairman is there of the board, but the chairman is just, somebody who does what I tell them to do. Now, in the case where there's a diversified shareholding, like in the ICICI Bank case, there the problem is different. There the problem is that the powerful CEO controls the board and the chairman. Now the problem, and so the knee-jerk reaction of the chairman is always to support the CEO in such a situation. You saw this not only in ICICI Bank, but only in the recent days you must have been following the story about the Tata Trust and Venkat on AirAsia board. And the first reaction of the trust is not that they're going to do an independent inquiry to see why there's an FIR against Venkat, the managing trustee, but instead their initial reaction is, we want to just say that we have full faith in him. You see, so this is the knee-jerk reaction of boards, is that they immediately close ranks behind the CEO if it's a diversified corporation and behind the promoter if it's a promoter-led company. And the reason why this is happening more frequently in India, and the reason I give is because the elites in India are very interconnected. So there's a lot of social capital that is at risk. So if you are part of this club where you are on the board and you have access to powerful promoters and powerful CEOs, one of the rules of being an insider is that you cannot criticize other insiders. That's part of how you get into the club. And this is a club that, and the political and the social elites in India are much more interconnected than you see abroad. So if I come to India, pretty much I can connect to anybody I want to connect to through one phone call, because there'll never be more than 1 degree of separation between me and the person I'm trying to reach. But in the UK or the US, this is not true. The elites are not that interconnected, and they're not that interconnected, and the interconnection of elites in India is not only on an economic basis, that they have economic connections with each other, but also on a social basis. They meet at the same parties, they have marriages in each other's families. So it's very hard for these people to kind of break ranks. And I think that is the fundamental problem in India. So I'm not going to say there's something Indian about it. I'm going to say that the social structure that is in our country makes it very difficult for people to disagree with people in power, because that's how you get into the inside of the circle. And once you're inside the circle, if you criticize another member of the circle, then you're going to be thrown out again.
Oh, that is so true. I think it's just so difficult to disagree with men and women in positions of power. But Hemendra, coming to you, the market has traditionally attached a premium to well-governed and well-managed companies. And that perhaps also explains why HDFC Bank, which was much smaller in size, has been trading at a significant premium to ICICI Bank. Yet, why is it that boards of many of these companies have not pushed hard on this count? Does this have to do with the board? Does this have to do with the culture? Does this have to do with the CEO? I mean, why is very little effort made on this count?
See, let me add, why HDFC Bank trades at a premium is also because of its asset quality, its earnings growth, the quantum of earnings that it reports. So it is not mainly to do just with this corporate governance issue. But having said that, let me assure you that all these supposedly well-run, well-reputed companies, the moment you scratch a little bit, all kinds of muck starts coming out and comes out rather quickly. The problem in India is that nobody really wants to dig because there are social consequences for all these things. But this whole corporate governance is just a mere facade to impress the public, to impress analysts, to impress the media. That's about it. Behind that, everything goes on like the way it goes on. That is just a mere facade to show the world. Actually, they are doing exactly what they want to do. No one really cares about minority shareholders in the corporate world, really, because that's whoever's the promoter will run the show. If there's no promoter, a very powerful executive will run the show, and he'll just fill the board with all their sycophants that they get. And that's the real state of corporate India. And that is why you're seeing things in the iconic companies of India like Tata's, like ICICI Bank. So these are not some peripheral companies. These are very mainstream companies.
Sure.
And this is what you see. So this is actually the practice which is rampant everywhere. Only you're just getting an insight at this moment.
Okay, fair enough. Jain Gupta, the politician-banker nexus may have been broken thanks to the NPA crackdown. But looks like the corporate banker nexus is alive and kicking. Loans being doled in exchange for favors, not necessarily financial. What will it take to break that nexus? Because in some sense, that's at the core of what's happened here, and that's a kind of reform that we need to look at, from a long-term point of view. How can we break that nexus?
Okay, first of all, I will not be as pessimistic as other speaker about that nothing can be done about corporate governance. What we are lacking is the character. Now, as I say, the first safeguard or the person to safeguard the interest of investor or anything is the auditor. Now, recently we have seen some change, that since auditors are under pressure, auditors are being questioned. So, there is a spate of resignation, and that too with disclosure that why they are resigning. Remember, it took only one TN session to reform the entire election system in India. Now, if you see transparency coming and responsibility coming in the audit process, the responsibility will be shifted up to the board also. Let few board members resign independently, stating the reason that why they are resigning, the entire thing will change. I will give you name and shame is very important thing. I will not like to name, but I will tell you a former SEBI chairman was on the board of Kingfisher, then he was board of United Spirit, and he was party to approval of all related party transactions. So, my issue is very clearly that as long as we accept the board position as a ornamental or like a item song in the movies, we are going to have this. But the day people start naming and shaming and questioning people, probably time will come that everybody will act responsibly. Regarding the nexus between the corporates, borrowers, something, again nothing can be broken unless until somebody takes the lead, and that is the day we are waiting. And I hope in next 2-3 years a lot will change in the corporate governance position in the country, because auditors are changing. Now, next turn will be the
I'll have to come in there. I'm running very short on the time.
Company secretary, because
right.
What happened?
Mr. Gupta, I'm sorry, I'll have to intervene there. I'm really running low on this show as far as timing is concerned. Nirmala Kamaraj, you have the last word on this. Does this entire episode and the outcry that has followed signal that India and perhaps Indian businesses have come of age? The chalta hai attitude, the theek hai attitude in business is no longer acceptable. Investors, government, media, stakeholders, everybody now demands a greater accountability from Indian industry.
I mean, one would only hope that that is so, but I think while people are becoming more careful, I think what has been said in this panel is very interesting, because one of the people made a comment, the more we increase the laws on corporate governance, the more we do these box-ticking exercises to please external stakeholders and couch them in socially legitimate terms, the less corporate governance actually takes place internally. So what you are seeing is that there's a lot of activity that goes on, which is to please the external stakeholders, to make them feel that there's real corporate governance. And this decoupling, research has shown that this decouples real corporate governance from taking place, because then by doing these tick boxing exercises, basically the people can then align the rest of the corporate governance to whatever suits the internal stakeholders' needs. So I think we need some more reform over here. We need some reform with teeth over here. You need to see some board members being prosecuted. You need to also know, we need to have a law like there is in China, which says how many times have independent directors dissented on any particular board, and when there's a dissent, let's report it to SEBI, because to tell you the truth, or to the shareholding, to the stock market, because to tell you the truth, I would like to know what is the level of dissent in Indian independent directors with the decisions taken. I have a feeling it's very, very low. It might even be, unheard of that an independent director actually dissents on a board or abstains from a vote. So I think we need to make sure that we protect the independent directors. We make sure there are reports every year which actually showcase to what extent are independent directors actually dissenting on these boards, or are they just playing along with the game?
Okay. I take that point, completely timed out. There are a lot more ground to cover, but I'm afraid completely timed out. Can't thank this wonderful panel enough for joining us and sort of putting things in perspective, what's transpired at ICICI Bank and the broader message really from this entire saga. The ICICI board has taken a decision, but many of our experts assert that it's not just too little too late, but it also lacks a strong decisive will. Let us now hope for a fair probe. After all, at stake is the future of not just one of India's most celebrated captains of Indian industry, but also India's largest private sector lender.
Indeed. Now that said, ICICI Bank controversy does raise questions on the low level of corporate governance in Indian companies, the ineffective role of the government, and of course the failure of the regulator at large. After all, ICICI isn't just any other company. It's a bank that deals with people's money and an institution whose very foundation must be trust alone. The question is, will today's action restore some of that eroded confidence? That's a question to ponder over, but thanks very much for being with us. Up next is Top 10 at 10.